Hello, this is Jackie B. Peterson, author of Better, Smarter, Richer, 7 Business Principles for Solopreneurs. As you know, it is my goal to help solo businesses, those of you who operate as single-person entities, be more financially successful. And I do that through my work with my book, Better, Smarter, Richer. It's a fill-in-the-blanks workbook. And it takes you on a journey of self-discovery, looking at all of the things that you think that hold you back from making the money that you would like to make. I also have a series of videos on my website, which you can download. The favorite one that everybody likes is how to charge what you're worth, because you know that's such a big deal for us solos. And also, I hope that now that you have found us on the radio, that you'll continue listening to our show weekly on Solo Pro Radio, which is where you are now. I have a great guest today. Her name is Christine Green, and Christine has been on a long and fruitful spiritual quest. She had a background in business and education, plus 20 years of teaching and counseling behind her. When she was just completing a summer of teaching spiritual classes in Brazil, and suddenly she knew exactly what she wanted to do. She was called to the ministry. She relocated to Portland, Oregon, and was ordained in 2001. Since that time, Christine has become the heart and soul behind Sacred Heart Ministries, which inspires women to improve their personal and professional lives. She is the author of several books, and she inspires women through her volunteer work as well. I look forward to learning more about Christine Green. Hello, Christine.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well, I'm so glad you can do it. It's just fabulous. I've just been reading about you and your work, and I'm sure we're going to get to discuss more of that and how you came to be doing what you're doing. I think you're making a big difference in the world.
Oh, thank you.
So
are you.
Thanks. Thanks. I'd like to hear about your background, where you grew up, where you went to school, and then what's inspired you to embark on your spiritual journey.
Gosh, I actually grew up in upstate New York, in a small town in upstate New York. And one day, my dad was watching football, and I think I was a young teenager, and it was January, and there was about maybe 3 or 4 feet of snow outside, freezing cold, and he's watching football. And I looked and I said, where are those people? They had short-sleeve shirts on, and the sun was shining. And he says, they're in San Diego. And it just clicked. Someday I'm going to San Diego.
I don't blame you.
It took me a few years, but eventually I made it out there. And
wow.
I got out to San Diego, and I was studying in faith called Science of Mind. The founder is Ernest Holmes. And I studied there and became a prayer practitioner. And what happened was that's when I went to Brazil. I went to Brazil first and was so inspired from the opportunity to go and teach that when I came back, I knew I wanted to be a minister. So that's when I went into ministerial school, and then eventually I ended up here in Portland.
That's pretty fabulous. So you've always had a pull towards your spiritual journey. I mean, this just didn't suddenly drop on you. You've really been pulled in that direction.
Right. I grew up Catholic, and so I had a very strong faith. But what happened was I was always puzzled by the rules and the laws, and I asked a lot of questions. And Catholicism, the answer is, well, we'll know when we're in heaven, or that's just the way it is. And the biggest shift came when I was maybe around 10 years old, and our teacher, the nun at school, was teaching about purgatory. So purgatory is this place when you haven't confessed all of your sins, you go to purgatory, in this place of nothingness. You're not in heaven, you're not in hell, but there's just nothing there. And you won't see your family, and you can't get out unless you've asked for atonement, or so to speak. And how do you how will you know? How do you know how to do that? And they said, well, we won't know. We won't know until we get to heaven. It's like, well, I'm in purgatory. How am I going to get to heaven? So I was always puzzled and on this quest of, what does all of this mean? And why would God send me to a place of where there's nothing there? And so it was my investigation. I was on this spiritual journey of what else is there? And so I researched and found myself in more of an open, non-denominational teaching that was open, had open questions, and the belief was ask questions. This is an open journey. Ask a lot of questions. And I learned that there's not one path. That what's more important is to find our relationship with God. And as we find that, that's our divinity and that's our spiritual connection.
Oh, that's great. That's a great story. And so you had done that teaching and been on this spiritual quest, and eventually then you said, wait a minute, I'm called to the ministry myself. And so you studied and were ordained then in 2001, is that right?
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. So it was, how long after that did you found Sacred Heart Ministries?
It was the same year when I was ordained. I created the ministry, and I created it's a teaching ministry. It's not a pulpit, it's not a church, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to be free to go wherever I was called, to be able to share principles of truth. Similar, I love your 7 business principles. They're so great. And so I have spiritual principles that I share, and the spiritual principles are to help get us in touch with our divinity, with our divine part, our soul, our spirit, however you refer to it, or however it's called to you, and that out of having that, we have an easier path to walk. That a lot of things that keep us stuck, if we find we can make that inner connection, the outer work seems better, easier.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's so wonderful. So it's a teaching ministry, not like, for those of us who don't know this stuff, it's a teaching ministry, which means that you don't have a church and a congregation per se, but that you are in the community. Is that what that means? That you...
Exactly.
Okay.
So I'm teaching a class at a church in Lake Oswego right now. I also teach classes at the Center for Inner Awareness in Salem. I've taught classes in Reno, Lake Tahoe, all around the Oregon area. So I get to go where I'm called.
Wow.
I love that. I love that freedom.
Yeah, you're like a freelancer.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. I wonderful. And then it seems from what I've read that you not only have a teaching ministry, but that you also decided to focus your ministry on working with women. Is that true?
I did. I decided to narrow the focus because I was counseling and saw that women had very specific issues, and we all had the same issues. And they were the things that kept us stuck, that women want to move forward, but they seem to be stuck. Maybe a feeling of unworthiness, guilt, feelings of lack, feelings of just not being able to move forward. And so I decided to focus on those issues and specifically with women, and that's how I came to write Authentic Spirituality.
Oh, that's wonderful. So what do you think the biggest concern is that women have?
You know, we judge ourselves. We're so hard on ourselves. That inner critic that is always badgering us, making us wrong. Who said you could do this? How do you know that you're going to succeed? What happens if you fail? That inner critic is always beating us up. The thing is to learn how to re-energize or reprogram that inner critic so it's on our side, connecting with us rather than being against us.
So is that kind of what your work is then, is helping people reprogram that inner critic?
Exactly.
Wow. That's big stuff. That's big stuff.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
If we can get past that, then there's an opening. And money is a big issue. I work a lot around with women and money. Before they can even go to see you and the work that you are doing, because you do such fabulous work with helping women create their wealth and build a business, I have women before they get to that point and work with them on how can I have the self-esteem, how can I find the worthiness that I can even claim my business? What is it that I want to claim for myself? What is it that I want to do? How am I going to use my skills in the world?
Wow. You're right. And that is a huge issue. We talk to so many, particularly creatives, who have said the programming they have received has said, oh, your work is wonderful, but you're never going to make a living at it. You'd better get a degree in, anthropology, biology,
exactly,
something.
Exactly.
Or they've been told, you're not going to try to charge that for your work, are you? That's just way too much. Who would ever pay you that? That
right.
sort of thing.
Right.
And it just plays upon that awful inner critic that is talking. Wow.
Right. So the more we can identify that, because it's been suppressed all of our lives, we don't know why it's there and we try to bury it, so we suppress it. The problem is you can't suppress it. It's going to keep popping up and popping up and popping up. The thing is we have to dig it out and look at it and say, okay, this is it. Where did this come from? We can usually identify where it came from. It's like, what's the truth? What do we want to know about this? And then using certain tools and techniques, bring it out in the open, kind of air it out and give it a new life and say, okay, I am worthy. I can do this. I am capable. I'm so grateful. And then to begin to do that and shift that, and then have the freedom to move into what it is that is in the heart's desire.
Yes. And, when you can get to that point, you're on your purpose or your passion, when you can, be in your heart's desire. And that's, I think, what we're supposed to be here doing, is whatever that is that's calling you forth. And to have these awful feelings that you're talking about stand between you and doing the work that you are meant to do is what a waste of a lifetime.
It is. And it's so frustrating.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's when I was counseling, what I found is that women were coming to me and they all had the same beliefs and they all had the same issues. And I was keeping notes and like, wow, that's one of mine, or I just heard that one before. And it's like, wow, we think we're so unique. We think that we're the only ones with this problem. And so then that makes it worse because we feel isolated. I'm the only one. Everybody else is better than I am, and I'm the only one with this problem. And the fact is, no, we all have a little bit of insecurity. We all have a place where we're maybe afraid to take a step, but we can find the courage to do that. And so that's how I wrote Authentic Spirituality, and I put case studies in there so that people could see that there were women who had a problem and they got over it. And then, so what can I do to get over guilt or that place where I make myself wrong all the time? I have a chapter called, Would You Say That to Your Best Friend? Because
what a great one.
We say stuff to ourselves so much, we would never say to another person.
Right.
We would never say those things, but we say it to ourselves.
Wow. So talk about the book. It sounds like it's somewhat like Better, Smarter, Richer, that it's a workbook and you have exercises in it and stories. Is that the layout of the book? I haven't seen it.
Yes. It has in the back spiritual practices, so they're journaling exercises. Okay. That whatever the chapter is about. Another chapter is leave your victim self behind, so that victim voice that we always hear. So I talk about what happens when we talk to ourselves as a victim, and that usually there's 3 pitfalls. So in being a victim, that we feel powerless. We have a feeling of powerless. We can't move forward. We're often in denial, that we deny that we're feeling powerless, and then we have this sense of unworthiness. And so those are the pitfalls of victim thinking. So how do we get out of it? Well, we get out of it with a spiritual principle. And so the spiritual principle for that chapter is whatever I take responsibility for, I can change. And so then we begin to work with that. Okay, how can I take responsibility? And then at the end of the chapter are the journaling practices.
I see. So someone can actually work the book on their own, or are these the classes that you teach? Are these, do you work with groups of people to work the book?
We finished our first year of a year-long study group. So we had 10 months for the 10 chapters of authentic spirituality. And I had 2 study groups. One was by teleconference, and one was in Beaverton. And we worked through each chapter, and I had worksheets, and we worked through those, and then there's part of the class is working through like some issues, so we have time to do a hands-on. And it was so successful, the group asked to do it again.
Oh, great.
They said, let's do the same thing over again, because every time you do it, you're in a different place.
Yes.
So I'll be offering the class again beginning in January.
So how many people are in the class, and for how long an extension? I mean, do you do it once a week, once a month? I mean, how do you work
It's
that?
Once a month.
Okay.
And both of them average around 10 people or less. So it's a small group. It can be bigger, but it's been a small group. And as I said, one is on the phone, and it's so great. There's some people from a friend from San Diego, someone from Ohio, and Reno, and several from Portland. So people from around the country that are participating. And then the one in Beaverton, same thing. We usually have between 8 to 12 at that group. And it's just a great group.
Oh, that's terrific. And for how long do you meet each time?
90 minutes.
90 minutes. Okay.
Right.
So
it's
everybody gets a chance to talk.
Very reasonable. Everybody gets a chance to talk, and it's open. I ask for, please, this is about questions. So that I say, here's the chapter we're working on, but what's more important are the questions that you bring. What are the challenges that you are having? Because that's what we can address. That's what we can work through. And we have a great time. It's because we get to laugh together. We get to share our stories, and someone will say something, and the other person says, "Wow, I have that same thing." And then we'll tell a story about ourselves, and everybody laughs, and that community is really wonderful.
You know,
be able to share those
things.
things.
Study groups on Better, Smarter, Richer as well, and the cohort is fabulous. It's the cohort that, I say I'm teaching, but it's really the cohort that is teaching. And the same thing comes up where people talk about, oh, I've had that experience and I've had this experience, and and they're teaching each other and really, really love it and really enjoy it. And everybody grows. Me too. I grow.
Yes.
I've
learned a lot.
Yeah. Oh, that's just wonderful. That's just wonderful. So go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say you are finding the same thing. It's that we're so isolated these days because of the work everybody does, and we lead such busy lives. We're very isolated. And what's so important is to come together in some kind of community, whether it's on the phone or if you can go in person, but it's having that community that we make that connection. And it just makes life richer.
Yes, it does. It's absolutely wonderful to come together that way and be talking around a purpose. And, as a facilitator, which you are and I am in my groups, as a facilitator, the job is to make sure everybody gets heard, that everybody gets, recognized and appreciated, and feedback, and, kind of keep it on task or on moving. But, all these things come up, and, some of them we table, some of them we go forward, and it really makes a difference for people. It's really wonderful to do that. Really wonderful.
It is. It's so enlivening and enriching. And like you said, you learn a lot. I learn a lot. And we learn from each other. That's really what we want.
So you're working with women in both their personal lives, and that moves over to their professional lives. And so in your words, because I would say, well, yeah, sure, but in your words, how do you see that a woman's personal life affects her professional life? What are some of the differences, and what are some of the ahas that you see women having?
Oh my gosh, having struggles in their own personal life, if they have that, it's hard to move into a business life if they're struggling.
Yeah.
Whether it could be with family or just their own personal issues or health issues or grief, that when you have those, and those are so huge and tremendous, it's hard to have the clarity to move forward in business. So by beginning to do that work and beginning that with the inner work there, because really ultimately there's no difference, because we're going to carry those over into whatever we're doing. So if we can begin to make that shift individually, then there's an ease and an opening of, oh, here's what's possible.
Yes.
Here's what's possible for me.
And certainly, if you are going to have and want to have a successful business, you have got to have overcome all of that, self-doubt, lack of self-worth, and certainly that victim mentality, or you're never going to be able to compete out there in the world, which is so competitive and so full of small businesses, each of us putting ourselves forward. If you're carrying those burdens of those mental attitudes, poor self-esteem, victim thinking, et cetera, you're just not going to make it in your professional life. Just isn't going to happen.
Exactly. I call it, when it's that struggle where we're trying to make things work on the outside and we haven't dealt with what's happening on the inside. It's called rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. The Titanic is going down, the ship is sinking, but we're too busy trying to make the outside work. And it's that we have to go in and do that inner work and get that foundation and build that foundation, create that strength. Then we have the ability, then we have the knowingness, then we're ready and willing to conquer, to go out and explore, to have an adventure in the world of how we want to express.
This must have been quite a journey for you to write this book. And so what surprised you as you wrote the book?
I think that I saw how much alike we were, that we have that, and Jack Canfield writes about it in his book, books on teaching years ago. When I wrote those, he talked about children and how children feel so isolated and that they feel alone, like I'm the only one with this problem. And we carry that into adulthood. And women very often feel isolated and alone. I'm the only one with this problem. And
therefore there must be something wrong with me.
Exactly. Exactly. And once we get to find out that we are the same, we're facing the same problems, have the same struggles, and we learn how to do it together.
That's really great that you say that, because I would think that would be a big aha for people, is to find out that what they're worried about, everybody's worried about, and, what they're thinking about, we're all thinking, and to have the experience of not having shared that, because it goes against the grain of looking good or betraying family secrets or,
yes.
What are the millions of other things, you have to keep your act together. That's one that gets me, and I keep saying, well, we're not supposed to be doing an act. This isn't supposed to be an act. It's supposed to be us. And,
Right.
But we get this, like we're supposed to put up a good front, rather than be who we are. So I would think particularly young people who hadn't had conversations with people before would say, oh, my goodness, what a relief this is to understand I'm not just weird,
Right.
Yeah.
Because there is such a stigma. We don't want to be different or weird.
No.
And it looks like everybody else has their act together. Everybody else is doing great.
They may have an act going, rather
right.
than being their authentic selves and being able to express and to live in who they really are. And I can see that this work would help people to, move to a level of authenticity that would certainly result in much more professional success for them. Because they would be who they are.
It is.
Wow. So when did you write the book, Kat? When did you write the book, Christine?
Gosh, how long? Or
no.
When was it published? It took years. I was taking notes for years.
Oh, I'll bet.
And I was sidetracked. I was getting ready to publish, and my husband was diagnosed with leukemia, and he was very ill, had a bone marrow transplant and a stroke, and he just couldn't heal, and he passed away. And so I set this book aside, and what's so precious about authentic spirituality is he was helping me. I'm sure he was bored to death because I would show him a chapter and he'd read it and he'd help me edit it and he'd say, why don't you do this or that? So
I doubt if he was bored to death. I bet he was thrilled to be included in your journey.
Yeah, thank you. So he was a big part of it, but he was sick for 3 years, and I kind of set everything aside. And after what I saw when he was sick, I spent so much time in and out of hospitals as a caregiver, and I saw that what a challenge it is to be a caregiver, and how do you build your faith? How do you keep your faith when you're in the midst of that? So I started writing notes and stories about things that had happened to me in the hospital, and I was inspired after he passed to turn it into a book. And so I was in the midst of writing this and writing these little stories, and I wanted to make it a journal because I wanted the caregiver to have a way to write down what's happening, because it's really precious, the things that happen to us, and you can't remember them. There's so much stuff going on, there's no way you can remember. And so I was in the midst of writing that and unpacking his bag from the hospital, and I found out that he kept a journal before his stroke.
Oh, my goodness.
It was a very beautiful journal, and it was very spiritual. He was reading the Gospel of John and sharing his struggles and what he was inspired from the Gospel of John. And so I was able to include that. I included it, and I wrote Anatomy of Caring, Spiritual Insights for a Caregiver and a Patient. So I included my struggles as a caregiver and his insights as a patient, and created it into a journal.
Wow. And when was that book published?
That was, I that was a miracle in itself. I knew that he was working it from the other side because I had not published anything before, and it was published. I think I was able to finish it within 9 months of first starting to write, to put it together. And so that was in 2011. And then when I finished that one, I went back to Authentic Spirituality, and I finished it up and edited it and finished the editing that had started so long ago, and then published that one in 2012.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. So are you doing anything with the caregiving book like you're doing with the Authentic Spirituality? Are you doing any classes or cohorts or studies around that, or not?
I do offer grief counseling. I think that's so important. I haven't offered any. I would like to offer some study groups or a place for caregivers to come and be, because it's such a traumatic thing that you go through, especially when you're walking your loved one through illness.
Yeah.
I haven't found that's a focus that I would like, and I haven't done that yet. I have been working with professional caregivers in settings like assisted living. That what I found is that I wanted to share some principles and spiritual tools for the professional caregivers. Okay. What I found was I was so grateful to the nurses and technicians and all the people who serve in a hospital. They have no idea what gifts they give. And I saw that also because at the same time, while my husband was going through that, my mom was in assisted living.
Oh, my goodness.
And I saw what she went through and how, and the level of care that she received. And the people that do this in the healthcare industry are heroes and angels.
They're just amazing, aren't they?
They are. They are. They're incredible beings.
They manage to be helpful and personal and compassionate and loving without stepping over that boundary, of trying to make everything right or trying to do things for you, because I think women have a very hard time with that boundary sometimes of, where are you and where am I, and, how do I express compassion and love for you without trying to do it all for you. And
Great point. That's
and true. I think that the caregivers are very good at doing that. They're very good at that boundary. And, that someone who is going through grave illness or end of life, they're on a journey. And they've got things to do. They've got work to do, to bring that journey along. And, it's kind of like, when your kid is learning how to do something and you don't want to step in and do it for them, so you're kind of holding the energy, you're back there and you're there. If they should fall off the edge, you'll catch them, but you're not going to touch them unless they really need you to do it. It's a fine place to be, but you have to be very very attentive to do this well.
It is, and those caregivers put aside their own personal lives.
Yes. And
then they go to take care of other people.
Yes.
And it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary what they do. And the caregiver, the family member caregiver, is going through such turmoil and pain, and to watch their loved ones be sick, and that this professional caregiver is just there to be a blessing.
Yeah.
So I can't say enough for that field and for the people that do that work. They are just really angels. They're truly angels. And I tell them all,
if we can make the link, when you're working with the readers of your Authentic Spirituality, where you're helping people overcome their lack of self-worth or self-esteem or, their victim mentality, you're actually trying to move them to that same place that a professional caregiver is, where they are able to see themselves objectively and be compassionate for their shortcomings and take the steps to move beyond it, and I mean there's a narrow path there, where you're
yes.
And I think the caregivers and probably your authentic spirituality people have a lot of the same things in common of how they walk that path, to what would I call it, self-reliance, of having a good sense of self-worth without moving into being conceited, or being egotistical, but having a belief, a very fundamental belief in yourself. And, it's interesting stuff.
And it's a struggle both ways, because you want to give the tools, and you see, I feel like a cheerleader sometimes wanting them to have what they need so that they can get stronger. And very often they will set their own growth aside for someone else. And that's one of the issues that we work through as women, is that very often and I'm not talking now about when there's an illness, but just that we'll put other people ahead of us. Right. And so we'll set our dream aside and take care of this person, or put our energy onto a family member or a child or a spouse, and set our own dream aside. And that comes back after a while, like, why didn't I do that? Or what was I thinking?
Right.
So,
I've more than once reminded people that it's like being on the airplane, where you remember the rule is that if we lose oxygen, we put our own mask on first, and then we put the mask on of the child that we're traveling with,
Yes.
And that old thing of you have to, if you don't take care of you, you don't have anything to give anybody else.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's hard to go out and change the world and make a difference in the world if we can't take care of ourselves.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not going to happen.
No.
So if we have a vision of wanting to do something in the world, or make the world a better place, or what I share with my clients is, you taking care of yourself is making the world a better place.
Yes, it is. Yes.
That's how we're going to make things better. It's finding love within our own lives. It's finding peace within our own lives and harmony. That when we do that, that ripples out. That's what's changing the world. There's nothing apart from us that we have to go fix.
Yes. Yes, absolutely the truth. Love it. I'm sure your groups love it too. Big ahas must happen when they're working with you.
I love when they have that,
mm-hmm.
when they see that, they have that insight. It's so rewarding. Yes, you got it.
So from reading your information, it says that you volunteer quite a bit of your time with Dress for Success. So I know who that organization is, but I don't know a whole lot about them. So do you want to tell us about them and what they do?
Dress for Success is an organization that provides empowerment for women. First
mm-hmm.
of all, there's several ways, but first of all, that when we look good, we feel good. Mm-hmm. When that we're taken care of, and that we can go into a job interview. And the whole idea is to get women back on their feet, so that they can be out in the world and be self-sufficient. And one way of doing that, very often, women who are trying to get back on their feet, or going through school, or very often a family struggle or whatever, one of the things they do is they don't take care of themselves. So that they haven't been able to, they don't have the funds or whatever to have the clothes that they need to go on a job interview or to go into the workplace. So Dress for Success has referrals from various organizations that will refer women to them, and then they go and they work with a coordinator, and that they receive clothing. They'll get a haircut, help with makeup, accessories. There's even an avenue where someone will help with a resume, and then I've been then so that they can go on the job interview and they can get a job.
So you're doing the internal Dress for Success and working with them because they do the external Dress for Success.
Right. Exactly. So once they have a job, then monthly there's a group that meets. It's a professional women's group, and they invite people to come in and speak. And I've been speaking there for, I think we figured it, six or 7 years. I've been.
Oh, I'll bet you are
a speaker there. That I'll go in and offer them some set of tools. There's usually Pam Mason is the coordinator of that program, and she'll come up with a theme for the year. So this year was about being mindful. So my talk was about creating mindfulness. And then I also have offered free consultations to women that wanted them. So it's been a wonderful way to connect with women and help make a difference.
Oh, that's just fabulous. As I see, I can, as you talk about it, I can see that it would be very much in alignment with the work that you're doing. It looks to me like you've got several faces on your basic work, but it's really different faces of the same thing, of helping people identify and feel comfortable with and articulate and live in their authentic self.
Exactly.
Doing that in all kinds of different ways. So, do you have any quick tips or thought habits or techniques that you could just share with our listeners, and that we could use? It's headed into a really busy and difficult time of year. We know we look forward to the holidays, but we also dread them. So are there some things that we could all do or practice or do as a daily reminder that would keep us in better shape?
Sure. The first one is to be the observer. That as we can observe our own thoughts, as we can observe what we are saying to ourselves, and what we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're feeling, as we can be the observer, that's the first thing. And to record that, I think journaling is one of the most powerful tools that we have, because when we are able to write that down, we have a place to reflect. We have a place to process, and we have a place to look back and see how much we've grown. So the first thing is to be the observer. And the second one is to pay attention to that external voice and make it an external voice. That inner critic, make it an external and say that self-criticizing part of me is not me. And it's trying to convince me that I'm not good enough. I don't believe it. And so making that inner critic an external critic and say, who made you the boss of me? I don't think so. And that's one way to kind of put it in its place, set it aside and put it in its place.
Don't let it know it can't get the best of you.
Exactly.
I like the part about making it external instead of internal.
Exactly. And when we do hear that voice, is to stop, to be aware and say, okay, I'm going to stop. And one of the techniques I share is that when you hear yourself saying, oh, what am I going to do? How is that? I'm never going to get through this. Stop. And to clap your hands. That when you clap your hands, you've done something physical as well as say the word stop. And it changes in your body. It brings your attention to it. And then say what it is you want instead. So that when that inner voice says, oh, this is never going to work, how am I going to do this? Stop. And then clap your hands. I I know that I have the ability to get this done. I know that I have the talent and the expertise to do this. I have faith in myself. I have faith in God. Whatever it is that is needed to be said to bring yourself out of it and to not be the last word from the inner critic, but to give it a new word, a new affirmation.
A physical thing that you can do with saying stop and clapping your hands. So it's kind of like a post-hypnotic suggestion that,
exactly.
That you recall the work that you've been doing and you're studying and and what you've been reading and journaling, and you recall it and you take charge again, and that the stopping and the clapping brings it forward in your mind so that you are not overwhelmed by things going on around you. Is that right?
Exactly.
Oh, that's great.
And one of the most powerful ways, and this is the month of gratitude, is to give thanks.
Yes.
And to find things that we're grateful for. That we focus on that this month, but it's important every single day. And I often invite my clients to write gratitude lists because every night make a list of what you're grateful for.
I think that there's so little of that, Christine. I think you're right. There's so little of us giving recognition to all of the wonderful things that happen to us every day, and we fall into whinyhood, oh, this didn't happen, this didn't happen, this didn't happen, and instead if we start noticing how many good things actually do happen constantly, and, constantly we get blessings in our lives that things are working, and we somehow fall into this thing of, well, it ought to work. And, the truth is, it doesn't necessarily ought to work. And, it does. Things work for us all the time. And, the sun does come up. And, and my alarm clock went off on time. And, I met for coffee with friends, and I have friends, and, on and on. And we just don't get into that enough, And it makes all the difference.
It's a huge, it's the simplest technique we have that we can do is to be in the moment, even in the midst of where things look like they're going wrong. What can I be grateful for right now? I have my ability. I'm breathing. I have my hands and my feet. They work. That I have resources around me. I have friends that I can call on. I have that the sun came out today, that I live in a beautiful place, that whatever it is, to begin with the smallest thing and to continue to expand on that, and it changes everything.
And I don't know if this is true for other people, but I know this is true for me, that the more I notice the things that I have, about which I have gratitude and for which I am grateful, the more they happen. Yes,
that's so true. That's the spiritual principle. Whatever we are grateful for increases.
Yes.
Because when you're grateful for it, you are noticing it and you're putting your attention on that, then more things show up, and it's amazing.
It is amazing. So, Christine, I've just had a wonderful time talking to you, and we're just about out of time, if you can believe it.
The time went so fast.
We're just flying. And if some of our listeners are eager to talk with you, and how about sharing with us how they can contact you?
Wonderful. Thank you. My email address is revgreen, REVGREEN, at sacredheartministries.org. That's the easiest way to reach me. My website is www.sacredheartministries.org. And those are two easy ways to connect.
Terrific. Well, it's just been a joy speaking with you. The time has flown, and I loved hearing about your spiritual principles and the way that you're working with people. I think study groups are fabulous. And I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in today. And I hope that you'll tune in again next week. We have these great conversations with solos every single week, and I hope you'll make this a regular. And I want to remind you all that this is Jackie B. Peterson. I'm the author of Better, Smarter, Richer, 7 Business Principles for Solopreneurs. And my goal is to help you find financial success as a solo operator. The world is full of us, and we can find the success that we're looking for doing exactly what we are supposed to be doing out there in the world. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll talk with you again next week. Goodbye.
Thanks, Jackie.